As
All right. All good. Billy Alcoholic. Good to be here. Sobriety date, January the 5th of 1990. My home group is the Tell It Like It Is group in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. Welcome to anyone who's new. A big welcome to anyone who's new who hates Alcoholics Anonymous as much as I once did. Like, if you hate AA as much as I did, you are my people. I'm not one of those people who came to AA. I know you hear it in the meetings and they're like, oh my God, I felt right at home. I never felt more not at home in my life. I was 14 years old at my first AA meeting. I was wearing my probably favorite Aussie shirt and jeans and black boots and a pack of Marlboro cigarettes stuck down the front of my pants so my mother didn't see I had cigarettes. Like, that's who showed up to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was in and out for 9 years. Now I've been sober since, like I said, 1990, which makes me sound horrifically old, which I'm dealing with, or I'll have to go to another program for that. But I have a tough topic today because I'm supposed to talk about the traditions, and yet this is a beginners meeting with tons of beginners. So I'm going to try to come at it from a beginner's angle. The truth is, most newcomers that I meet at a meeting that I've never met before, that I talk to after, most of their questions are traditions related, even though the word tradition never comes up. Newcomers hate authority. They want to know who's in charge. I hate authority. I still struggle with authority, but back then I really hated authority. Newcomers want to know where the money's going. Newcomers want to know if you got to believe in the God of the church or the temple or whatever building we're meeting in. Like, is that a requirement? Newcomers want to know, yeah, you tell me this is not about God, but I don't got to read too far down that list. And I get to God and higher power and whatever else. And then there's today's AA. Last night I was told at a meeting that's not too far from me, somebody made an AA related announcement saying that his boss told him to make it. That if you are looking for work, his boss is looking to hire you. The problem is his boss is a lowlife who takes advantage of newcomers. And that's, we have a safety card in AA. It's yellow. We have a safety service piece. But our original safety program was the 12 traditions. That's the original safety piece. And if you're new, I care about your safety more than I care about anything else. That you not only have a right to be an Alcoholics Anonymous, but you have a right to be here and be safe. And when I mean safe from everything. Safe from predators of all types. Safe from politics of all type. Safe from anybody's religion they want to shove down your throat of all types. Complete safety. And that's why the traditions are so awesome. And that's why some people struggle with them, because they want to find a way to bend themselves around the traditions. I'm going to read a little bit from a book, AA Comes of Age. Maybe someday you'll read it. But it says, implicit throughout AA's tradition is the confession that our fellowship has its sins. We confess that we have character defects as a society, and that these defects threaten us continually. Our traditions are a guide to better ways of working and living. They're also an antidote for our various maladies. The 12 traditions are the group survival and harmony, what AA's 12 steps are to each member's sobriety and peace of mind. Sometimes you'll hear somebody in AA say, oh, we're just like the Oxford group. No, we're not. We are not just like the Oxford group. Did we take some things from the Oxford group? Yes. But it also says in our literature this: the Oxford group clearly showed us what to do, and just as importantly, we learned from them what not to do as far as alcoholics are concerned. We found that certain of their ideas and attitudes simply couldn't be sold to alcoholics. For example, drinkers would not take pressure in any form, excepting from John Barleycorn himself. They always had to be led, not pushed. They would not stand for the rather aggressive evangelism of the Oxford groups. And they would not accept the principle of team guidance for their own personal life. It was too authoritarian for them. In other respects, too, we had to make haste slowly. When first contacted, most alcoholics want to find sobriety, nothing else. They clung to their other defects, letting go only little by little. They simply did not want to let go of too good too soon. The Oxford group's concepts of absolute purity, absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love were frequently too much for the drunk. These ideas had to be fed with teaspoons rather than by buckets, which is my same experience years, decades later when I came into AA. You had a teaspoon feed me this new way of life. I didn't even want a new way of life. I mean, I'm sure I could have been in some other meeting today, and because I had a cigar still lit when I got off my motorcycle when I chimed on here, somebody would have been offended that I still had a cigar lit. I mean, in AA, you will find people who want to make rules up of all types that you cannot find in our literature. I still like motorcycles. I still like to go to heavy metal concerts. And I feel God's presence at heavy metal concerts more than I feel in a church. And I don't think that makes me any less or better than anyone else. It's just my story and my path. But there are a couple of traditions, especially for newcomers, that are so important to know. One of the problems with the traditions is that sometimes we can't hear somebody because their actions are so loud, we can't hear their words. Sometimes we see horrible behavior from people who tell us how to dress better, but yet the way they treat people is so badly. Or sometimes we're in a meeting that we expect to be open and welcoming to newcomers, and yet there's somebody rolling their eyes or chatting to somebody next to them. Like our number one responsibility, according to Bill W., it's in As Bill Sees It, that our chief responsibility is an adequate presentation of the program to the newcomer. And yet we have all these people in AA who want to kind of mess with the traditions. Or they want to change our history. I have good news. If there is a total anarchist in here like me, there's some really good news. We actually support you go and starting your own program or fellowship. Like it's in our literature. We would not stop you from doing that. We would 100% support you. The truth is, was AA the membership more Christian, Judeo-Christian when it started? Sure. But that doesn't mean that AA is Christian. I just got in trouble 2 days ago because I spoke at a meeting. At the end of the meeting, somebody said, the reason I come to this meeting is it's a Christ-centered AA meeting. And they got mad when I said, well, there's no such thing as a Christ-centered AA meeting. It's not AA. If it's a Christ-centered AA meeting, it's not AA. That doesn't mean it's not good to have Christ in your life if you are a Christian. I think that's awesome to have Christ in your life if you're a Christian. I think it's awesome to have whatever God or higher power in your life you have. But I think it's super important to let the newcomer know we don't care. Now, I've evolved. Now, granted, I'm still shallow. and have a lot of problems, right? But I've evolved from when I came here. I don't go up the deep end about the Lord's Prayer. I say the Lord's Prayer, right? But think about this. There was a time when I didn't even like holding hands and praying, long before COVID, long before it was out of fashion. Do you know sometimes one day at my own home group, a member came up to me and said, "It really bothers me you don't pray with us." You know what bothers me? That he thinks the only way of praying is if I hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer. Like, not that I'm closing with the prayer of my own, bothering nobody, standing here just acknowledging my higher power. But these are the reasons we have the traditions, to make people feel welcome. Now, I know there's some people in the U.S., some here, some people not in the U.S., but I'm sure our crazy news gets all over. We're in the middle of another presidential election, which means that the extreme people in our universe are more extreme than ever, which is their right, by the way. It's just not their right in Alcoholics Anonymous. So, like, let me give you an example with the traditions. If you, like, picked up your son and daughter from school at 3:30, dropped one off at soccer and one off at baseball, went home and cooked dinner for them, went back out and picked them up, brought them home, fed them, did their homework with them, and then ran out to a meeting. If you forgot you had a political hat or shirt on, it's really none of my business. I'm glad in that busy life of recovery you have that you were able to get to a meeting. But if you're a person that is intentionally wearing a baseball hat or a shirt or something to an AA meeting to advocate out externally your political position, it has no business there. I hate to be the one to break it to you. It just has no business there. See, when someone sits next to me in an AA meeting, or if I greet you coming in a meeting, I've made, even a former atheist like myself, who believes in God today, I've made a spiritual commitment to my higher power. And that is when I welcome you or say hello to you or sit next to you or you sit next to me or bump into you in the parking lot. I don't care if you're black, white, brown, whatever. I don't care if you're gay, straight, bi, trans. I could care less. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't care if you're pro-gun or anti-gun, pro-choice or pro-life. And for somebody like me, I don't even care if you're a Boston Red Sox fan, believe it or not. And that is a lot of progress. If you sit next to me in an AA meeting or I put my hand out to help you, the traditions tell me that I have to make sacrifices to be a member of AA. That I have to make sacrifices. And some of those sacrifices, it doesn't matter whether I like them or not. That my job is to be an effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I know sometimes we read things, hear things, say things. For a while during the pandemic, Amazon Prime had My Name is Bill W. on, like, Prime. I don't know if it still is. But when it first went on, it seemed like every newcomer in the world that doesn't sleep and stays up all night vaping was coming to my group, a new expert on AA history, because they watched My Name is Bill W. like 6 times in a row, right? And anybody that's seen those AA movies, there's a really important part. Bill W. is in 182 Clinton Street with Lois. It's May of 1935. He's been sober since December. And he's not happy. Some might say depressed. And the reason he's not happy is that he hasn't been able to get anyone sober. Now, AA hadn't officially started yet. That's a month later, June 10th, 1935. Bill had not gone to Akron yet. But a month before AA started, Bill W. was the worst 12-stepper in the history of 12-stepping. The worst. 0 for a couple of hundred. Now, the problem with these movies is they're made from a very Al-Anonic point of view. And I love Al-Anon today, okay? But I'm a chronic teenage alcoholic whose mother went to Al-Anon, so I didn't always love Al-Anon, right? Other people in AA, their story is there's nothing worse than a belly full of booze and a head full of AA. My story is there's nothing worse than a belly full of booze and your mother's head full of Al-Anon. That's my story, right? It's brutal when you're a teenager and your mother finds Al-Anon. But what does Lois say to Bill in that movie? Who cares? You're sober. That's all that matters. Whatever you're doing, keep doing. And we even have a section of our book that says, when all else fails, work with a newcomer, right? When all else fails. But that doesn't mean working badly with people is good for AA. If you don't learn how to be effective with new people, this thing all goes away. If Bill had left it with Lois's word in that kitchen, none of us would be here today. He would have stayed sober, smoked himself to death, stayed sober. Him and Lois would have had a decent life. But thank God, if you're familiar with the Big Book, the man who wrote the doctor's opinion, which in a first edition book, he couldn't even put his name because saying that was so heresy in the medical field. If you happen to see a first edition Big Book, go right to the doctor's opinion. There'll be no Dr. Silkworth there. But that man who wrote that, Bill went and saw him like 2 weeks later before he went to Akron. And he told Dr. Silkworth the same thing, why he was a little upset and depressed. And thank God Dr. Silkworth said to him something different than Lois. He simply asked Bill to tell him his approach. And after Bill got done telling him his approach, Dr. Silkworth basically said, that sucks. It's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. Like, you can't tell a newcomer drunk or somebody who's still drinking that you were in a hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning and God used the wind to blow the window open and you felt like you were floating on clouds. Like, no drunk wants to hear that nonsense. You got to talk about the medical estimate of alcoholism. You got to talk about the allergy and the mental obsession and the spiritual malady. You got to get them to the Me Too moment. Anytime Dr. Bob talked about his meeting with Bill W., that he agreed to give 15 minutes and lasted many hours. Anytime Dr. Bob was asked, why did that meeting go so long? Dr. Bob always gave the same answer. Bill W. was the first person I met who talked about his own drinking, not mine. Bill W. is the first person I ever met who his drinking is the same as my drinking. When he starts, he can't stop. When he's sober, he's uncomfortable in his own skin and his brain tells him to have the first drink. There's a great pamphlet called Members' Eye View. It says probably the first time in the history of alcoholics, in that meeting, the alcoholic wasn't talked down to. And there's another line I love in Members' Eye View. Not talked with a parental condemnation. Like, I'm an expert at parental condemnation. My parents were condemning me from a young age, okay? But that's what makes us different. We meet someone outside in the parking lot, at a diner, in an AA meeting, in the back of the clubhouse. If we meet somebody the first time, we follow the instructions in the doctor's opinion. We don't talk about how many DWIs they have. Did their kids get taken away by the state? You know, are they homeless, whatever? No, we talk about ourselves. And we don't talk about our DWIs and going to prison and all that stuff. We talk about the medical estimate of alcoholism. We help newcomers figure out if they're an alcoholic. And we give them good advice about what AA is and what AA isn't. That we put money in the basket as a result of our seventh tradition so that we're self-supporting. Who would think that one of the richest men in the world, David Rockefeller, who Bill W. went to borrow money from to start AA, would give us the best advice in the world? That you alcoholics have been taking money from other people all your lives. This is only going to work if you support it yourself. I used to go to this anniversary meeting in New Jersey, and I used to love this person who chaired the meeting, because you know, at anniversary meetings, you get a lot of parents with tears in their eyes and children and siblings. And you know, I love AA anniversary meetings because in today's day and age, usually the family members have paid tens of thousands of dollars to fix their person. And they walk in a basement that looks like a combination of like the misfit toys of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Burning Man, and a Cheers bar, right? It's like a combination of those three things. And their family members look around at us like, I've spent $50,000 in the last 10 years, and now this odd collection of people in this basement has apparently given my child or my brother or my father or my mother what I've been trying to love and pay for. But alcoholism, you can't love it to health and you can't pay it to health. And this chairperson used to announce to the whole meeting, we're going to pass the baskets now. If you're a family member, I know your alcoholic has been bilking you and taking your money for years. So I have a nice announcement to make. We don't want your money. We don't take your money. Because Alcoholics Anonymous is for fun and for free, which is another thing I'll go into if you're a newcomer. If somebody hands you a business card in an AA meeting that has anything other than their name and their phone number and some goofy AA saying, throw it out in the garbage before you leave the meeting. Just throw it out. We don't have life coaches at AA. We don't have sober sponsorship in AA. We don't take money from newcomers in AA. Like, all we do is give this away for fun and for free. That's it. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a life coach or any of those other things, but it's separate than AA. It's outside. Nothing to do with AA. Just like if you're in a treatment center or a recovery house, like when you go to an AA meeting, if somebody that works at that place is there with you, once they go in that meeting, they surrender their title. We don't have counselors in AA. We have AA members who are counselors, but when they come to an AA meeting, they're just an AA member. AA is the great equalizer. Like, when we all walk in under that door, we're all as damaged as the next alcoholic. That's it. And then when it comes to God, I just saw flyers for the Recovery Church in my meeting. I'm sure the Recovery Church is awesome. I've never been there, so I'm getting a little better. I tend to think something's good rather than just talk bad about it when I have no experience, right? But that's a new part of my life, right? Took me years to get there. Years. I'll guess Recovery Church probably has better music than the Catholic Church I grew up with. I'm guessing. But it's not AA. And it's not like some second tier level of AA. Like the Recovery Life Bible. I've seen people bring that into meetings. If you're a newcomer, the best thing I could suggest is that if you see somebody reading out of something out of a meeting that is not our literature, just know it's not our literature. Like, get a good sponsor who can tell you what AA is and what AA isn't. That's why I like conference-approved literature in AA meetings, because then it's not confusing to the newcomer. Now, I'm a big reader. I'm in my backyard now. If I went into my living room or upstairs to my bedroom, you would see piles of books. I love to read. I love it. But that's my personal reading. There's a book, a spiritual book that changed my life when I was 5 years sober. I don't say the name when I speak at the podium. If you want to ask me off to the side, I'll share it with you, but I'm not endorsing that book. There's no such thing as AA anything. I know people want to tell you there's AA softball. I love softball. I was actually like addicted to AA, what people called AA softball for a long time. I love competing. I'm such a horrible loser and an even worse winner. I'm like that person. So I love competitive softball. But there's no such thing as AA softball. There's people in AA who play softball. There might be a league of people who are sober, but that doesn't mean it's an AA softball league. Just like there's no such thing as an AA church. And if you are new, there's so many different AA groups out there. And let's be honest, maybe some of them are not for me. But the difference in my life today, and God knows how many years ago, is that just because I like something doesn't mean it's the best. I know that's shocking to a person like me looking at myself in the mirror, but that doesn't mean it's the best. Like, if you've heard something in an AA meeting that's made you not feel welcome or pissed you off, have a sponsor. Go to a different group. Because I'm also not one of those like lunatics who think that if I meet you, I'm just going to read the big book to you for like 3 hours straight, right? Like, we're human beings. I have a sponsee who's on death row in the United States in a particular state. That state hasn't executed anyone since 2011 or 12. They've had a court hold up on executions, but he's been on death row a while. I met him on death row. I was there as a corrections volunteer at a workshop. When I first walked by his cell, he clearly did not want to talk. And since I've been an inmate myself, I'm very in tune to that you're very respectful of people wherever they are. You take them where they are. But as I was just passing his cell, I saw that he had a New York Knicks thing hanging up. And I turned around to him and I said, "Wow, are you a long-suffering New York Knicks fan too, like me?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "It's really hard to be sober and be a New York Knicks fan." And I'm just telling you that because for the next 40 minutes, him and I talked about sports, right? He's like 7 years sober at the time. I'm like, I don't know, 29 or something. But we had a one-on-one human conversation, which has grown into a long relationship now. We communicate via email. The corrections department reads my emails going in, reads his emails going out, but It's one of the greatest relationships I have in my life. So I'm not some militant that thinks we're not human. The line in the sand with the traditions is when you like try to convince somebody that something that not AA is AA. That's the line in the sand. You know, I really identify with people who struggle with God and religion and spirituality. And it was really, really a tough struggle for me. I'm just being as honest as I can be. And we got to give people as much time as they need. You know, I thought, because I heard How It Works read at so many meetings, that when it gets to the three pertinent ideas, that I thought the last one was God could and would if he were found. Like, I listened to it so many times, that's what I put in my own head. But it says God could and would if he were sought. Like, we're on a seeking mission here in Alcoholics Anonymous, not a finding mission. Some people find one God and stick with it for the rest of their lives. Some people switch gods. You know, but my point is, it's the seeking that matters. And alcoholics, God, we love to alcoholics. What makes us an alcoholic is the allergy and the obsession and the spiritual malady. But God knows we're interesting people, is putting it mildly, right? Because we get into something and we get into it. Like, we are full steam ahead, all in. Like, I don't know about where you live, but you ever have a member of your home group go to CrossFit? It's all you hear about is CrossFit. Like, CrossFit will bring you to a new level of physical spirituality. Or how about yoga? The yogis love to talk about how much it, and I'm here telling you that's all good stuff. Separate from Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I could tell you that Metallica is better than both of those. But it's not AA. Like, that's my personal music choice. Anything where I insinuate that someone else has to do something else besides the 12 steps is going to go against one of our traditions. So two things I'm going to end with. The first is, there's a big difference between membership and the program of action. I support anyone to an atheist, agnostic, any kind of whatever, belief, non-belief. But our program is about using the steps to have a spiritual experience. That can't be denied. That all started at a day in 1909 that you got to really dig down in the books to find. In 1909, Sigmund Freud was the #1 world's leading psychiatrist in the world. And he got invited to Clark University in Massachusetts to talk. And when he came there, he brought a young intern doctor protege to carry his bags and take care of him. And that man was Dr. Carl Jung. And while Sigmund Freud was becoming important and making talks that you can still find today that are some of the most important in his life, but not important for people like you and I, Carl Jung met a man named William James. And William James was a psychologist from Harvard who wrote the book Varieties of Religious Experiences. And William James let Carl Jung know that since the beginning of mankind, people have been having these sudden spiritual transformational experiences that completely revolutionized them, that a complete psychic change, where pirates and slave ship captains become preachers, where people just completely change. And William James told Carl Jung that the problem with these sudden spiritual transformations was that they were as rare as being struck by lightning. And that's what we all have to be grateful for. That between 1935 and 1937, a bunch of alcoholics realized that they found the recipe to get struck by lightning. The recipe for alcoholics to become sober. And thank God they put it in a book and published it in 1939. So that same recipe is here today. And the great thing about the recipe is we don't tell you what you have to believe in. We tell you how to find that belief. What or who you believe in is none of our AA business. But we have this recipe, these 12 steps, so that you can have that and find it yourself. I don't argue about meeting makers making it versus being a big book heretic versus all in the middle. Meeting makers all make it to the same place. The fork in the road. And the big book describes that fork in the road. Are you going to blot out your entire life with alcohol, or are you going to accept spiritual help? Well, I'm an idiot. I take blotting out my life all the time. I did for so many years. Accepting spiritual help sounds too kind of hokey, hippie-ish to me. I'm not a Grateful Dead person. Like, it sounds way too out there for me. But that's where meeting makers make it. But we're in the miracle creation business. Although newcomers all want to feel important and well needed, we don't help newcomers because we want to help them. We help them because we're recruiting them into the miracle creation army. Like, it's not about the newcomer I help today. It's about how many newcomers that person helps. And we never realize what's going to happen in the AA world. So I'll leave you with this story and I'll shut up. I'm getting ready to stop working. I've had a great career. And one of the places I'm going to travel to is Minnesota, which, if you know me, when I was a teenager, that's where they would send you if you were a bad teenager. Minnesota, if you're not from our country, is like Siberia. It's freezing there. Like 6 months a year, it's freezing. But I'm getting ready to go to Minnesota because I have to go to this cemetery. It's a military cemetery. Because I have to go meet one of my AA heroes I've never met before. Because we came into AA around the same time. I was a little younger. But my hero's name, his first initial is J. His name's really John. He was a young United States Marine who got sober. And in 1983, he got sent to a place called Beirut, Lebanon, which was very dangerous at the time, like it is now. And Jay, because he was on a combat mission, couldn't bring his, like, you know, when you run into an AA geek, they have like a stack of literature. This is way before an iPad or whatever. He couldn't bring his literature. And he wrote the General Service Office in 1983 in the spring. And he said, I'm young, I'm a Marine, I'm in Beirut, I have no literature, and I'm having trouble. So they sent him a bunch of literature. And he wrote back a month later and said, send me more literature. I'm so thankful. And then like 2 months later, he wrote back and said, he used Bill W.'s words. He said, I have good news to report. I started a group here. We got some people in the military and some locals. And in between the shelling and the bombing, when we can find safe time, we have a meeting. But now I really need literature because I got a group, so send me more literature. And this went back and forth for a bunch of months, and then they stopped hearing from him. And in December of 1983, the lady at GSO got a letter from somebody else at the group who said they had the heartbreaking job of letting the woman at GSO know that the young Marine she had been writing to, that young AA member, was killed in the barracks blast of October of 1983 when like 270 something U.S. military personnel were killed. But the person writing wanted the person at GSO to know that the group was still meeting. Like if you Google AA in Lebanon, you'll see meetings pop up. Like I'm going to go to Jay's grave. I know he died a hero already, but I want to thank him for what he did. I also know this. If people weren't putting money in the baskets in 1980 and 81 and 82, there'd be no general service office for that young Marine to be writing to. And there'd be no money to send him literature. Like our traditions are what keep us here. I read a letter in the GSO confidential archives. Full disclosure, I served as a trustee and as the chair of AA World Services. I read through some of the archives letters of Bill W's letter file. One of the reasons Bill W. wrote the traditions, and he wrote this to a person who was mad about the traditions, is that he discovered that alcoholics have a unique ability to blow up their own life, drunk and sober. That alcoholics have a unique ability to destroy anything good in their life. So we can say the steps are all powerful, but the truth is, even with the steps, I tell newcomers all the time, you want this great life in sobriety? It's easy. Just blow up your life. And then when you get sober and get it all back together and get perfect, you'll blow it up again sober. And you'll have a second or a third surrender, or maybe a fourth. But it's the traditions that have kept us here. So thank you very much for having me. I'll answer questions for 20 minutes if there's some, but thanks a lot. And if you're new, please, please, please don't listen to the urban myth of don't quit before the miracle. If you have 24 hours of sobriety or more, a miracle has already happened in your life. And don't quit after the miracle. Real alcoholics like us are not supposed to even make it one day sober. Thanks for having me.